account with online management tools to make the job of managing company expenses so much easier. That was easy. And when you need to get your staff from A to B in a jiffy, My Taxi has the largest taxi network in the country and the lowest wait times in the business, which can only be great news for yours. Talk to our business team today at business.mytaxi.ie.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie. Championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products.
Now you're welcome, Max. So we're going to review the Sunday Papers. We have Cliona Foley here in studio, a journalist and a host of the Off the Bench podcast as well here on Off the Ball. We have Mick O'Keefe, CEO of Teneo PSG and played for Dublin, Shamrock Rovers, Republic of Ireland underage as well. And they're both in studio. So I'll give you a look at the headlines firstly. This is we're streaming live on Facebook, I should say, as well. So I'll hold these up to camera so you can see them. This is the Sunday Times main section. And so, as is often the case on the Sunday Times, either doping or World Cup scandals tend to make it onto their front page. It's the Insight team again. So they have exposed Qatar sabotaged World Cup rivals with black ops. Whistleblower reveals ex-CIA agents and PR firm were hired in dirty tricks campaign to land the 2022 tournament. We'll fill you in on that in a second. We have the Sunday World then. They think it's all over. Clearly not. Brilliant, tense, magical match ends in a draw. Replay on Sunday. This is obviously Galway 130, Clare 130. That's right across the back pages, as you can imagine. It was, just an amazing game. It's Jason O'Donovan, so neighbours can't be split as unlikely hero levels Croke Classic. So obviously the Jason O'Donovan, they're nodding to Donal O'Donovan's famous last gasp equaliser in 2013. It was Jason McCarthy yesterday, echoed yesterday of 2013, an amazing last score. We have Star Sport then Sunday, and it's Lou will pocket a packet. This is Robert Lewandowski, who is looking for $500,000 a week sterling if he's going to join Manchester United. It seems United and Real Madrid are both in the hunt for Lewandowski, so he's looking for $500,000 a week. Jose says that's fine by me. He wants United to go ahead and do it. Rain check, and rain is R-E-I-G-N, as in this is Galway's rain. Rain check for Galway. Tribe duo Joe and Groge McInerney doubts for rematch is the big concern for Galway, I suppose, in just 7 days' time. Sunday Times sports section, mentioned the news section. The sports section has Clare and Galway level best. Clare fight back for thrilling draw with Tribesmen in Senior Hurling Championship semi. And then at the bottom, GAA confirms U-turn on Miller testimonial. We have the Mail on Sunday. Game on, again, Galway held by spirited Clare in a thriller. And the game on is GAA confirms it won't receive a cent as Liam Miller memorial match gets the go-ahead at Porky Queeve. So the GAA were offered a charitable donation for use at Porky Queeve, but they've said that they don't want a cent for it. And then finally, Sunday Independent. Dermot Crowe here on the top page. GAA to open Porky Queeve for Miller charity match. And then hurling summer keeps on giving, which it really does. McCarthy's last gasp leveller sends absorbing semi-final clash to a replay in Thurles. And down the bottom here, Taylor's confidence justified in bloodless victory. That's Katie Taylor's third round stoppage win last night. So they are your papers. Lots of hurling. We'll just deal with the Qatar thing firstly, because that may have piqued people's interest. So it's on the front page, and then it's on page 12 on the inside main section. And I don't know, Cliona, is this much ado about nothing? Is this Qatar basically hire PR firm, and as Mick O'Keefe knows, PR firms, do what they do?
Yeah, I'm not so sure. The phrase black ops is always going to make a turning page, but basically, they're saying that they hired PR firms to work in Australia and America to lobby, and basically to go to lobby groups and spread, bad stories. And the one that fascinated me was that they got some congressmen in America to get PE teachers to lobby on the grounds that the money could be spent better. And I thought, God, I wish PE teachers had that power in Ireland. They might want to actually get something properly done. So, like PR... Isn't that what happens? Don't people lobby all the time? And hasn't there already been an investigation into this? They're trying to. There is a push for another investigation, obviously, into how Qatar got this World Cup. Yeah. And it seems inevitable, I think, that will probably happen.
It looks like the Sunday Times has been lobbied, I think, Joe. By, if you read the subtext of this, is surely we should throw this open again, and surely England should host the World Cup. I think they're still reeling from losing out to Russia and Qatar for 2018 and 22. look, there's always questions around how these bids are handled, how they're run, the ethics behind them, and I think, you know, there has to be a serious question asked about, is there a better way of doing this, that you don't have what we've had in the past, crises of bungs, and, you know, this stuff here is light enough. You know, the worst crime that has been called out in this black ops is an economic report that a professor of economics was paid to produce, to say that it would cost significantly more to run in the States.
He's only paid about 10 grand.
Yeah,
very little. If that's a bung.
It doesn't seem that, you know, there's been other questions raised about Qatar around their treatment of migrant workers and other stuff, which is a different conversation, and also how the bid was won. But they've already been vetted, and they've passed one report. It's a bit of a much ado about nothing, I think, as you said yourself.
So, yeah.
I don't think there's a huge amount in this.
Considering the Sunday Times already exposed payments to Mohammed bin Haman, Qatar's top FIFA representative, this just seems a bit weak by comparison.
Well, and that came up in the interrogation that's already taken place, hasn't it? So I don't know how this is anything more.
Yeah. And you only have to look at the lobby against, you know, everyone up to the last minute about how Russia wouldn't be ready and there was going to be violence and this, that, and the other, and they ended up hosting one of the greatest World Cups on record and quite a hospitable country to go visit. Yeah. So it just shows you we have one Western media, one a better way of saying it, that, you know, there is an agenda here as well, which is we lost out and we'd like to win it back, please.
Yeah, probably. The PR company they hired, by the way, was BLJ's New York office. So BLJ Worldwide, they were paid $80,000 a month by Qatar to shape up the bid. Like, they have an email from one Qatar representative, to the head of BLJ Worldwide. So, I mean, it is not harmless stuff, but it's like they recruited journalists, bloggers and high-profile figures in each market to raise questions and to promote negative aspects of their respective bids in the media. So this is in the US and Australia. They talk about dozens of articles there. They talk about, I mean, how harmless is this? We've recruited, I mean, you mentioned the PE teachers, and then also they have a group of pro-rugby students in Melbourne, Australia, who will start appearing at rugby matches with signs saying, "Hands off our rugby. No to World Cup in June." I mean,
lads are getting paid in cans of 4X.
I don't know if that was going to swing it, you know.
It's hard. It's light subterfuge and espionage. Sorry, is the word I was looking for, rather than anything that's going to lose in the World Cup. There's also a huge amount of issues in that region. Obviously, you know, you can't travel from Dubai into Qatar, and there's a whole Saudi Arabian blockade as well there. So Qatar seems to be kind of getting blackguarded a bit by its own neighbours as well. So you wonder, is there anything to do with that in the whole thing too, you know?
Yeah, on the English thing, I mean, Australia and the US were the big ones to miss out on Qatar 2022. The Sunday Times are definitely hot for this topic. And look, it's good it's out there, but I don't think it didn't feel like it justified the front page material it was given, as if suddenly this was going to be a big expose, which might stop the World Cup happening there.
It was the mention of CIA, ex-CIA agent and Black Ops makes it sound really heavy stuff, but when you read into it, it doesn't seem as heavy as they're saying.
I thought someone might have been shot or kidnapped. Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Sorry to disappoint you, Joe.
So Katie Taylor then, Taylor's confidence justified in bloodless victory. Sean McGoldrick, this is one of the few places that makes the front page on. So she beat Kimberly Connor. Taylor would have got, it seems, well over 100,000 for this. It seems that for Kimberly Connor, this was the biggest paycheck of her career, an estimated $10,000, says Sean McGoldrick. This is Katie's first win inside the distance. Taylor was always going to win last night, he said. Aside from the fact that Connor's best days are behind her, she holds down a full-time job in Arkansas Water Company in Little Rock and cares for her 3 children. Two of them are twin boys born in 2015.
It was her first fight in a year, you know. So it was known that this wasn't a strong fight for Katie Taylor. Probably the significant thing about that fight last night was that there were 20,000 at it, and that she got a huge reaction when she came out, because they're trying to build her base in America and in Britain. I suppose most of us here really want to see her fight in Ireland, and this question of why has she not fought here is probably getting people frustrated at this stage, because I think there is a danger that you just might lose that connection, you know. I mean, people would really love to see her fight here, I think, you know. But 20,000 is a really decent crowd, and that's a really positive thing for her. I think, you know, inside the distance, 3 rounds, she knocked her out. So, but her bigger fight is coming up in America.
Yeah, I think there's a risk here. Look, and we're both big supporters of female sport, but it just. It's a bit Mickey Mouse, the stuff that she's involved in at the moment. She's knocking these people out after 2 and 3 rounds, or finishing, you know, bloodless victories.
She's had 2 very good fights.
But I think. Look, what
isn't that the nature of boxing?
Well, but like you gotta look at it and say, you know, is there depth of quality in women's boxing at the moment? Because it is a young sport, right? And she is a pioneer, and she's the best in her sport. I just wonder, she needs a big fight, and she needs a tough fight, and she does need to fight at home, I think, as well, would be fair.
Her last title fight was a tough fight, Mick, now.
You look at this last night, she's fighting someone who hasn't fought in a year, and she's gone after 3 rounds. She toyed at her for a couple of rounds, and then it was over. Like, that's not what people want to see. They want to see her fighting really good people.
Dave Hannigan had a piece in the Times this week. I don't know if you saw it, but he was just talking about the lack of depth.
And it is. It's a new sport. It's a relatively new sport.
It is a new sport. So you're going to have an issue where there are only a handful of people who could probably compete with her because she is so far and away the best.
And her own management have said they've struggled to get people to fight her.
And it is generation 2 in terms of where women's boxing is, but I just don't think it's good for her. I don't think it's good for the sport when you've got her beating people comfortably week in, week out, not even week in, week out.
But the only thing I'd say to that, I suppose, is and I think you're absolutely right about, you know, it's a new sport, the lack of depth and everything is that happens all the time in men's boxing as well, where they fight patsies. We know that, don't we?
It does, but there is significantly more depth to be fair. But you're right, there are fellas who are lined up as cannon fodder for people who are, you know, been geared up towards a crack at a title eventually.
But there is a
Paddy Barnes fought a fella who he called a clown, if you remember, in Belfast.
Oh, she was the guy who lifted over his head, for goodness sake. Yeah, crazy stuff.
But generally, world title fights are of a higher quality. Like if Katie if this was the early stages of her career and she had to fight a few nobodies to get her title shot, you'd say fair enough. But actually, when she is the belt holder, like, it's not like Anthony Joshua can fight someone. You know, it just wouldn't happen.
Yes.
Who's basically not a professional anymore, and it's just like a fairly pointless exercise. That kind of stuff, I think, damages the credibility of the sport a little bit. But this was really just to get her in front of 20,000 people and on TV again. It's a difficult one. Like, on the one hand, that's good for her profile. On the other hand, does it do more damage than good when it's such a nothing fight? That's the balancing act that her and her team are probably trying to work through. It doesn't seem like she's going to fight in Ireland anytime soon.
Which is a pity. That's the real pity, I think,
So the hurling's everywhere. It was all over the back pages. Eamon Sweeney, this was the greatest game in the greatest year in the greatest sport. He says, hurling with this championship, you are really spoiling us. And James O'Connor hits on the key issue. Recovery becomes the priority now ahead of the replay in Thurles. Holiday plans, including my own, he types heavily. Holiday plans, including my own, have been blown up all over Clare and Galway.
Joe, at this time of year, replays, All-Ireland semi-final replays, and finally they're a nightmare for anybody working in the business, because you're all like, oh, that's it, you know, change everything out the window.
James O'Connor had a long drive home last night with a lot in his mind about how do I phrase this?
I'll tell my wife tomorrow in the paper.
Eamon Sweeney has a lovely line as well on that brilliant, do you remember the Peter Duggan, that brilliant, that amazing tap shot? And he was like, he's a beautiful line, and he was like 2, 3, 4 challenges came in, buffeting the big man like waves beating against a fishing boat. He kept going, flicked the ball up and steered it between the posts, a force of nature unwilling to be stopped. It was just a magical moment.
It would have been a stunning point if no one was around him. Let alone being shouldered
from a hive of people. It was just phenomenal.
And I think all the papers have the same theme, and it's right. Like, the gift that keeps giving. It's I think John Brennan, the Sunday World. Thank God we can see it all again next week. I think it's been a brilliant hurling championship, and whether it was the best game ever or the best game this year even is questionable. Actually, in fact, there was probably more quality in somebody at the Limerick Kilkenny match.
Mick Foley, I think, and I think this is good, like, sober analysis to do this, because it's hard not to get carried away, I'm sure, when you're there. But Mick said at Croke Park, it was a manic game, often patchy though, when judged against the engineered excellence of both teams, but it was always compelling. And that's probably a good description.
That's exactly it. We were talking about it.
I was just saying that to Mick outside. Like, the playing of sweepers means that we don't see goals, and we're not seeing goals. And like, you think back to Tipperary a few years ago, when the minute they got the ball there was one thing on their mind. What about Kilkenny? The minute they got the ball there was one thing on their mind. You're not seeing that at the moment. It has become much more of a tactical thing. So I think those moments of just astonishing, you know, goals, they're not in it at the moment. And that's why I didn't think that game yesterday was a brilliant game, but it was absolutely thrilling,
riveting,
and enthralling, and riveting.
You had some flashes of Joe Canning.
What's the difference between brilliant and thrilling and riveting?
I do think that a team that goes for a goal, a team that has nothing on their minds, as Kilkenny used to have always, in that Kilkenny era of Eddie Brennan and Shefflin and the boys, they went for goals every time they got a chance. So did that Tipperary team. They went for goals. I don't see that at the moment. It's much more tactical with the sweepers. There's much more clearances out of the backs. You know, everything is much more. It's more clean at the back.
But if you talk about the flipper female, the depth in the quality of the hurling this year has been unbelievable. Like, it's probably been the best hurling championship I can remember, and we're still 2 semi-finals and a final away from being over. There's been very few dead rubbers. Even take some of the games like Dublin, Kilkenny and Parnell Park, you know, game in the melting pot with 5 minutes to go.
Yeah.
Like, the GAA have managed to take a brilliant product that wasn't broken and make it even better. And it's been a bad week, as we know, in terms of publicity-wise for them and a couple of things. But you have to give them credit to say this format is brilliant, and a few tweaks with a bit of a break in the Munster and Leinster thing, and I think you've got an amazing product that people will want to watch. And it's obvious now when you look at it, it's teams of the same quality playing the other week in, week out. And we're talking about a hurling championship where you don't have Kilkenny or Tip in the semi-finals,
or Waterford,
and Wexford are coming, and you've all this stuff there. So it's been absolutely brilliant.
And it's funny you should say depth. The depth in the quality of squads as well, Joe. The people coming off the bench are just keeping the momentum going. That's what was so extraordinary yesterday. Everybody who came off the bench was extraordinary. And you had Galway losing all those players and still hang. You know, it was a thrilling game.
On the sweeper point, Jamesy, funny enough, O'Connor says credit to the Clare management, because the changes they made, dropping back Colin Galvin as a sweeper and bringing Tony Kelly to midfield, that gave them a foothold. Because for the first 15, 16, 17 minutes before they did that, it was open season. It was scary for them.
It was,
So other bits and pieces in the hurling. So there's loads of reaction today. Daniel Carney is doing the rounds in various places. Dennis Walsh, I think it's just, as much as anything, the photo is really good. It's just well presented in the Sunday Times. So I was more drawn to that version of it than others for whatever reason.
You know, we know that's what happens very often. A player gets put up and the Sundays all get to interview him, and everybody does their best on it. And Dermot Crowe does it. A load of people in Sundays do it. But I thought the Dennis Walsh piece was lovely. And we were just in even a photo. Like he's photographed in his suit coming from work. He's an accountant, and it just is a really good photo. I love good sports photos. It's a still photo, but it's lovely. But it's funny, like a good writer goes for the kind of small details that really get you to the heart of the thing. And while they all interviewed him and probably all got the same information, I just think the way Dennis Walsh has written it is beautiful. And at the very end, and sometimes people say, oh, don't put the good stuff at the very end of an article, because if people don't read it, they won't get it. But I love nice finishes to pieces. I love that book ending. He has a beautiful line in it, because he obviously talks about changing his hurl. He's only 5'8" or 5'9", and a lot of them talk about that, about, you know, in the day of the big, massive, you know, big, strong, huge hurlers, how do you become as good as he is? And also to talk about the change of his role, moving him positionally. But he has a line, and he talks about Daniel talks about changing his hurl. So he used to have a lighter hurl, and his brother, who used to be on the Cork panel with him as well, said to him, you know, you're mishitting balls, you're not connecting properly. So he changed his hurl, and there's some really great insight into that from the player. But also Dennis Walsh's line is, the difference was the equivalent to a teaspoon of coffee granules. And I think that's what a great writer does. They just make you visualise exactly what that tiny difference was.
But his very last sentence is a cracker as well. Ounces, inches, today it tots up.
But even I was the same as yourself, Joe, in some respects. I saw this and I kind of went, oh, here's another Sunday doing the rounds. I've seen him 3 or 4 times already, and then it's a real skill to get the same guy everyone else has and make it interesting for people who are flicking through the Sundays. And a guy who's could have been on his 3rd or 4th 1-to-1, or could have been even in a group, and he's managed to pull stuff out of it and make it an interesting read. And I think that's a great skill that he's shown there.
I didn't realise there was that much going on in terms of whether lads are wanting a slightly heavier hurley or a lighter hurl, or and he says we're talking in, you know, the smallest of terms, like just a few ounces, because he says, like, at the same time, he says, I like to play quick and I need to be fast in rucks and get balls out. So if I use a hurley that's too heavy, I feel I'm going to be slower. So it seems like it was a tiny change.
Just changed the weight slightly.
And he's striking the ball much better, which is very interesting.
Really, that's a lovely piece. And I thought there was a nice piece.
Just a mention of Carney, by the way. So he's doing his accountancy exams. So he says Carney took the challenge personally. No fails, no repeats, no let up. He scheduled, this guy seems to be incredibly impressive, scheduled his days, rationed his energy. He said some exams clash with Munster Championships, so he put hurling and studying on different wavelengths and flicked from AM to FM. And he says those exams are more a test of your bottle and your resilience than your mental capacities, which is exactly what I face in in sport, and he says, I was very disciplined in terms of my time. I would have a reputation for being energetic and very committed, so I like getting up early, getting stuck in, and I have the reserves of energy to do that.
Yeah. I'm sorry, just a bit. He didn't.
Screw you, Daniel. All right.
Yeah.
He's not happy.
And he's a really nice bloke.
He didn't just change his hurley. Actually, changed his hurley maker. We should say that as well. And again, those are the little details that make you think about players when you're looking at them. Dermot Crowe had a nice piece, I thought, in the Sunday Independent as well, about all of the family connections with the Limerick team that are playing today. And I just thought that was a really nice piece as well.
What's the gist of that?
Well, just talks to some of the fathers and the relatives. So you've got so many of them. Like there's Finns and Hegartys and Quaids and Flanagans. There's a ton of them who all have had fathers and relations who played for Limerick as well. So it's just a nice piece. I'm always interested in those family connections, and how players evolve, with that connection.
Eamon Dunphy. Yeah, Eamon Dunphy, baby. So the Sunday paper review, I should mention, by the way, is brought to you this afternoon with Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. So Tommy Collins written a brilliant piece about Dunphy, but I think it's right to go to Dunphy himself, who's in a few places, not least the Sunday Business Post, where he's spoken to Tom Lyons. Dunphy, RTE have lost their nerve. They want strong people out the door. This is an extenuation of what he said in his piece in the Star during the week. But look, we can all pick out the piece that jumped at us. Can I just give my favourite bit? By a distance. So, I mean, he's arguing that RTE is ageist, is one of the points he's making. He even says Bill didn't go of his own volition, which I wasn't quite sure. That's a big line. He says he was badly hurt. He was told he was too old. I think he should have been asked there who told him he was too old, because that's a big enough allegation to make. And that's just let hang there, and actually that's not picked up on.
Confirm it.
But Dunphy says he wasn't too old. He chose, being a good PR man, to go himself, but he didn't want to go. I would like to know what's that is based on, or where that comes from, or is that just Dunphy's sense of Bill's decision to go? Anyway, he talks about this sense that RTE is ageist. Declan McBennett, the new head of sport at RTE, did an interview with Gaelic Life a while back, and he said across the course of that interview that on Saturday coverage one day that all 13 panellists had been men with an average age of 53. And Dunphy says, he talks about this not matching the age of the audience. He says, I mean, the people who like me most are the kids, young guys. He says, if I go out on a night out, it's effing pandemonium.
And on that line as well, matching the audience, what's that? Well, obviously David Atman can go F off. Yeah.
and he's 92.
The thought of Dunphy being out with the young guys and the pandemonium. I regret never seeing Eamon Dunphy on a night out now so much suddenly.
This is, I actually think...
the Tom Lyons is
Tom Lyons, and in the Sunday Business Post has and there's actually layers and layers to this stuff, and I think... it's people, there's an age thing here as well of people who remember Dunphy, but there seems to be this kind of narrative about Dunphy that he was an angry firebrand with a real chip on his shoulder, and that's why he was so brilliant. And then he had this thing about Charlton, and he had a cause, and he really believed in it, but that's probably unfair to him to say that he actually just became a talking head for just to be outrageous for outrageous sake.
Can we round back to that point in a moment, because that's the Tommy Conlon take. Let's actually just tell people what's in this. So
of course.
He's very harsh on RTE here. I mean, his line is basically that RTE had lost their bottle. They want the strong people out the door. They've lost their nerve. Sanitized. They're obsessed with social media. That's the gist of what he said. It's a real parting shot.
It is, and I think it's a brilliant article, and there's layers and layers, and that is one theme that goes through this around what's the future for sports analysts, and do you want these bland talking heads who are superstars in their day who'll just come in and play it safe? He's saying that there's a huge reaction now to what he called we're monitoring comments. I think he has a go about people saying that they don't like what he was saying on social media, and he goes, well, that's just keyboard warriors. Who are they representative of? And he said this was constantly raised in the last 12 months. People are saying this on Twitter, people saying that on Twitter, and I said, who are these some people? Are they representative? And there's this constant fear of a Twitter storm, and I think it's interesting, and he goes deeper into this again around he starts talking about a lack of the ownership of media in Ireland. He starts talking about a whole heap of things, and I think his fear is that it's all becoming a little bit too sanitised, and that we could get to a situation where you have this sports analysts and it's just the same. And will there be room for another Dunphy or his like to come on, and really that you don't care what the half an hour Twitter storm is afterwards, that you just drive through and you can have that kind of better balance, so to speak.
Well, he definitely noted the McBennett interview in Gaelic Life where McBennett talked about not having personalised attacks.
Yeah.
Dunphy is, who is he to effing say that?
Yeah.
Like, you can tell that really peed him off.
There's a bit in this as well where, and I was saying this to Cliona off air, that, you know, he Dunphy craves this attention to be respected as an intelligent journalist. And if you look at, and Tommy links this in as well, but this is it weaves through the Sunday Business Post piece around he left school at 13, self-educated, and this kind of craving to be accepted as a journalist. And he talks about how him and Bill were journalists. You know, Bill was a current affairs journalist and he was a journalist, and they would come at things as journalists rather than sports analysts, and they would try and find the story within it. And there's probably an element of truth in that. And to be fair to him, Bill and Giles, like, they paved the way for modern sports and analysts. But I do think there is something in that about him and, you know, his craving for acceptance and all that kind of stuff as well. And then he lashes out and has a couple of digs at people, which you'd kind of expect.
Well, he says of RTE, so like this is just a small line which is buried, but he says now in RTE, the problem is they say they're broke. The culture in there, ... There are too many bodies around the place doing nothing.
Well, like... Yeah, but that is also from somebody who goes in, you know, to do matches and comes out. So, you know, again, that's a personal view. Yeah. I think it is interesting that, you know, the whole notion of him being a firebrand and being passionate and being also intellectually sharp and smart. Declan Lynch is very good on that in the main body of the Sunday Independent Day, not in the sports pages. It's well worth a read, because what they do is they reproduce the article that Dunphy wrote back in the day, and he was a beautiful writer, and he's a gorgeous writer, and he's read his books. Like, there's a great line when he wrote this after Ireland beat Egypt, after the famous pencil throwing incident, and he's defending his attitude, why he got so upset at that. I think it's really worth, for people who didn't see him in those days, to read that. And there's a beautiful line in it. He says, Niall Quinn scoring a goal, and he says, a Sicilian beside him rose to applaud it, and he said, valour has been rewarded, an unusual occurrence in Sicily. Like, that's the quality of the man's intellect. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So, Declan Lynch's point is that, and it's a great line, like he's talking about Giles' autobiography and his memory of him as a kid. He'd take the table tennis ball and he wouldn't give it back to them, and they'd beat him up to try and get it back, and he wouldn't give it back. He was so stubborn. And the headline is, Dunphy finally gives RTE its ball back. But his line is, when you see him now on TV3 talking politics, he still retains that intellect and that fire and all of that stuff. So, you know, don't write him off, is basically what he's saying. That and the piece that Dunphy wrote after the Egyptian game in 1990 World Cup, I think they're well worth reading as well.
Good idea to republish that, yeah.
It's a great idea to republish it, to get some sense of that.
Yeah, because let's come back to that point that maybe younger people didn't see him at his best. I'll just give you some other quick quotes from this Tom Lyons piece. So, on Leo Varadkar sympathising with Donald Trump's hostile sentiments towards the press. It's sick. He's got sympathy for this effing lunatic, says Dunphy. Asked what he regrets most and what he liked most. That was good. Yeah. So he loved I've managed to stay alive for 63 and a half years, baby. He thought that was... But isn't that quite sad? That was such a gimmicky showbiz moment. That was his highlight anyway.
Yeah, but the Rod Little piece, I think, in that was interesting as well.
Rod Little stuff is the thing I'm most ashamed of, he says. I said that he left his wife, ran off with the young one in the heat of battle with Bill.
If he said that now, he'd be sacked, though. Like,
correct, and that's his overarching point, I think.
Be back,
yes,
you know?
That is his point. Yeah.
I was fanatically on Roy Keane's side. John and Liam weren't. It was a tough moment. It didn't damage our friendship long term. He says, Joe Duffy got me on Liveline the following day. When I agreed to do it, up popped Rod Little. Joe didn't tell me Rod was on the other line. I immediately apologised to Rod Little and said, look, I've done something unforgivable. So in fairness, he doesn't feel great about that. There was one other line which just struck me as a bit, you know, he talked about being in with Richie Sadlier and Darren Maloney last year. There was a row because he felt Sadlier had ambushed him with bad statistics and that Dara had sided with Sadlier. He says there was a row. He said, look, we've always been collegiate. We always worked as a team. Those stats are misleading. And then he says that he had used bad language. He says, I used bad language afterwards, and there may have been a couple of women on the floor. I mean, Eamon, they're all right, honestly.
Don't haven't made a difference.
They can handle it. They're just fine, those women, as much as they were shocked and had never heard those words before.
I think the piece as well, it just kind of sums up Dunphy in that, you know, yes, he's an extremely smart guy. He's a host of contradictions, which actually makes him so interesting. You know, you can be obnoxious and amazing and caring and all these other things all in the one go. He flip-flops himself.
That's what makes him interesting.
And that's what makes him interesting.
Yeah.
Like, and I think, it's a passing of the baton a bit. Bill obviously has passed on, unfortunately. Johnny Giles, Dunphy, it's almost the end of an era, I think, for those, which is a pity in some respects.
So that brings us to Tommy Conlon.
Tommy Conlon's piece, because the headline is Dunphy's formidable natural intelligence revolutionised football punditry, and that's your point, Mick, isn't it? That they did revolutionise it, and then as happens in life, things go on. But it's a really, really good piece, beautifully written by Tommy Conlon. And he talks about somewhere down the line he ran out of righteous fury. Somewhere down the line he took the money and turned his wrath into performance. Somewhere down the line he became his own karaoke singer. But he also talks about what he was good at, and I think it's a really, really nice piece.
His contention is that Dunphy was genuinely angry and brilliant and a firebrand, and somewhere along the line he just got a bit tired, and it's maybe understandable, and he just continued on. So he says, I agree with you, by the way, Cliona. I thought this was just the most brilliantly written thing. Like, Tommy Conlon, when he gets into something, can be just brilliant. Written. The opening to Shane Kern's book that Tommy worked on, where he talks about what it's like in a dressing room. I don't know if you've read that.
Yeah, I've read it,
just
brilliant.
Class. So, I mean, his basic disappointment is that Dunphy disappeared, He says, as you said, somewhere down the line he ran out of that righteous fury, and he said he became his own karaoke singer, which is a brilliant way of capturing it. His own karaoke singer. Yeah. He took the money, turned wrath into a performance. The organic outrage of his early years became a synthetic material that could be produced on demand. It parlayed into repeating royalties, like a songwriter singing his classic hit long after he'd lost the emotion that inspired it. But again, it's so nuanced, this piece, because he says this wasn't an instant development or a binary dilemma like a man facing a fork in the road. He says that even in the later phase, where he's banging out the karaoke version of Eamon, he says even in the later phase, there were also spasms of pure clarity when he nailed the issue at hand and became compellingly relevant once more. So he's not saying that, like, even in the latter period, that Dunphy has just been completely karaoke. There were moments and flashes. But frankly, he says, for 20 years and more, the bell rang and Dunphy got up off his stool. But he says, you just get tired. He just got tired.
Yeah.
Is it harsh? Is it fair?
I think it's
a really good piece. I think it's a really good piece. And he's one of his final paragraphs, he says, it cannot be questioned that he did the state some service. In addition, he contributed mightily to the gaiety of the nation for a very long time. And he talks about the time his mother was looking at, Dunphy's mother was looking at his TV career and saying she would scold him that there were two Eamons, the private and the public. But everyone knows there was at least a baker's dozen.
And that's it's a lovely article, and I think what you get into is that Tommy, with the benefit of his experience in that as well, Dunphy came back after having a very average football career with no money, with a family, no journalistic experience or qualifications, and carved out a career for 40 years for himself and has made a lot of money out of it, and you got to go, that is a brilliant thing to be able to do. He didn't play on his footballing prowess when he was younger or anything like that. He didn't have that most of the guys now have when they come in, have had these kind of lavish careers. And you got to say fair play to him. And
he's still box office, because people are still going to pick up the papers today and go and read the Dunphy stuff.
His Sunday Business posting today is box office.
People will still go.
That's Tommy's point. There are still, but it is notable. Dan McDonald wrote a really tough piece on him during the week, which, I thought Dan made some great points. So Dan talked about, you thought it was too harsh?
No, I thought it was a bit harsh.
Harsh, maybe. Heaven forbid anyone's ever slightly harsh on Eamon Dunphy,
Not like he can't take care of himself.
Exactly. But Dan made a great point that, over the last 15, 20 years, there have been big issues with FAI financing. The plan for the stadium seemed ludicrously ambitious. All these millionaires were going to pay a load of money to see maybe one game a year sometimes. And Dan said, where was Dunphy there?
Where was his righteous anger there?
Where was calling out the FAI or John Delaney? It's a great point.
It was a really good point to make.
Dunphy today in the Business Post says the FAI need to be challenged. But
Dan's point was he didn't do it.
Pretty good platform yourself.
And that there was a big gap. He had a big gap with the grassroots in Ireland, and I thought that was a very fair point to make. But I do think that comes also from the perspective of, first of all, you don't see a lot of pundits in Britain standing up for the local grassroots football. They're in there to talk about a certain thing. And secondly, a lot of those people didn't see him at the height of his righteous. When he did take on the FAI and when he did slag off Charlton for the way he was playing with Ireland and not showing enough respect to the players, but it was a long time ago, and a lot of young people have never seen that.
I don't think I've seen him at his very best. Certainly not in writing. Certainly not in writing.
I grew up reading his stuff, and it was fantastic.
And it was politics and football.
Everything was current affairs. There's one issue I have with him on this is it's easier kick the shit out of Cristiano Ronaldo, who you're never going to meet. And he was, and they always have this thing in RT, there was this kind of, we call it as it is, and we do this and we do that, but they don't meet these fellas week in, week out, and we're from a distance, whereas it's harder to criticise people you have to actually bump into in the pub or bump into in the shopping centre. So, while they were hard and we were harsh and we called it as it was, and this, that, and the guys in Sky don't do it, and the fellas here don't do it, the Beeb, they're all clapping you in the back. Well, that's easy to do if you're not living there.
But that's always but that's always the great quandary in sports journalism and columnists, which is usually columnists are not people who are on the daily beat meeting everybody, so they can afford to be have really strong opinions, because very often they're not meeting the people on a daily basis and don't need anything from those people on a daily basis as well.
So Business Post with Tom Lyons, you're going to want to read that for sure, and I think Tommy's piece is really, really
it's excellent.
Really excellent as well.
Good,
and the Sunday Indo, I think, to read that piece, to see how well he wrote and how well he's done.
That's the main section beside Declan Lynch.
Beside Declan Lynch. It's a double page spread. It's very good.
I keep meaning to go back into the bloody archives and read, go and read 10 or 15 Dunphy articles.
Well, maybe they'll pop up somewhere. You never know.
Well, yeah.
If there were somebody was smart.
We'll take a very short break. We're back with a few of the pieces. Floyd Landis with Paul Kimmage today. There's the hockey this evening. John Green on the sports policy. Dave Alred has an interesting piece. We won't get through it all, but we'll do our best.
Off the Ball on News Talk. Tech Talk with Jess Kelly.
Coming up this week, we meet the Kerry-based company that's using robots to build wearables for cows and hear how technology is transforming the agri-sector.
Tech Talk with Jess Kelly.
Download the podcast now or tune in this evening at 6.
On News Talk.
Ooh, that's a long queue.
Oh, we'll jump in halfway and take the chance.
I don't know. She'd never say yes.
Just ask. Chance your arm.
This milk's past its use by date. It's probably fine. Go on, chance it.
We all take little chances in life, but there is a more serious risk many of us should never take. The risk of melanoma and skin cancer. The good news is skin cancer is one of the world's most preventable forms of cancer. So let's stop being skin chancers and start protecting our skin. For more information, visit mariekeating.ie, proudly sponsored by Novartis.
My dad was a Jack Russell, loved chasing cars. Me, I prefer being in them. The whole family out, windows down, wind in my hair. Lick a bit of ice cream off the back seat, any flavour, any car. You see, we have AA car insurance, so we're covered to drive any car. Well, they are. I don't drive, obviously, though I do have a licence.
With AA car insurance, our members get fully comprehensive insurance to drive other cars too. Go to the AA.ie and get €100 off today. Who's got clever car insurance? Excludes value product. Minimum premium of €280. Acceptance criteria, terms and conditions apply. AA Ireland Limited, trading as AA Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Bruce Betting are one of Ireland's leading bookmakers. Download the Bruce Betting app from the App Store and our new Android app in the Google Play Store to see why we're giving you more. Bruce Betting, in store, online and now on your phone. Please gamble responsibly. See dunlewy.net.
Okay, sprechen Sie Deutsch?
I am a Berliner.
Ich bin ein Berliner.
I am a donut. Luckily, my taxi is the same in every language, and you can use the app in 9 countries all over Europe. Just touch down and tap. It's holiday time with My Taxi.
This summer means fast ground and tight grass. It's longer sessions under the shadow of the highball. Calling Bagsy for the lift, tight haircuts and looking for the shift. But mostly it's waiting. Waiting for exam results, the matchday squad, that chance. Because the moment you cross the white line, you're not just playing, you're totally alive. Some moments teach you everything you need to know about yourself. The Electric Ireland GAA Minor Championships. This is major.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie. Championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products.
Welcome back. We've Cliona Foley here in the studio and Mick O'Keefe as well. We're going through your Sunday papers. We'll be over to Croke Park in about 40 minutes' time, half an hour's time, and begin the build-up there. Tommy Welch in situ. We'll talk to Dan Shanahan as well. Shane Stapleton is there with the lads. So 3:30 throw in for Cork against Limerick. It is the Sunday finale of the Tour de France. So the Sunday Times are very focused on, obviously, Geraint Thomas and the win again for Team Sky. Sunday Independent here taking a different route for sure. It's Paul Kimmage with Floyd Landis, who obviously won the Tour de France and then lost it for doping. What is it about this doper I admire so much? Play on the question he once asked Lance Armstrong, says Kimmage. Well, let's see now. He swears more than I do. He does rage better than anyone I know. His name is synonymous with lies and deceit, but I've never met a bike rider who speaks more truth. He won a stage at the Tour de France once that was the greatest I've ever witnessed and possibly the greatest of all time. He was an extraordinary bike rider, but he's an even better person. And this is 10 weeks ago where they hooked up in Manhattan. And we have 2 pages here across the Sunday Independent. The short version, Cliona, is that Floyd Landis was in a terrible, terrible place the last time they met, and now seems to have reached some kind of beginnings and moving on with his life.
Yeah, he was living in a cabin in these mountains and drinking a bottle of scotch a day. So, and he looks back at that time and says, you know, he had depression way before any of this happened. It was way before that. My drug initially was cycling. That's what helped me deal with depression, which I think is a really interesting line. Yeah. Because I often wonder about some of our obsession with sport. It's a drug for us, and also for athletes it can be a drug, and when they give it up they struggle badly with it. But it's interesting that he says first, I always had this problem, I always had this predilection. It was cycling, then it was other things, and now. And so that from there it becomes interesting.
Because often when you hear people giving up, say, alcohol or cigarettes or whatever, often one of the pieces of advice is, well, you've a slightly addictive streak running through you, so you almost need to replace that addiction with something else, be it go and get fit or do something healthy. So it is very interesting that he has that level of awareness that his first drug was very much cycling. It was to combat things. And even he says, sitting in the cabin drinking all day. Yeah. Weirdly, he says, and look, anyone listening, we are not advocating anything here. This is just his story. But he's saying he reckons the alcohol kept him alive with the depression, because he says, I wasn't able to sit there all day thinking about things. So for me, it was almost being able to turn off his brain for a while. And he said he almost thinks that's how he stayed alive.
How he got through it, yeah.
Which sounds like a horrific kind of state of affairs. I mean, Landis and Paul did a big famous kind of 30,000 piece with Landis a number of years ago. Like the short version of Landis obviously won the Tour de France and then was done for testosterone, which he denied taking, actually. He said he was cheating, but they caught him for the wrong thing. So
and that's part of this discussion still as well.
He fought that, spent, $2 million plus, and that ruined his life, basically, divorce, everything, and tried to get back into the sport, didn't go very well. 2010, he becomes the key whistleblower. Wall Street Journal, all the emails come out. He sent it to the CEO of USA Cycling at the time, Steve Johnson, and kind of said, this is what's been going on. And then he filed a whistleblower lawsuit against Lance Armstrong personally, and that's been settled recently. He got about $1 million for that and had his legal fees paid. So that's what's been going on in his life up until pretty recently. If you're wondering who he is,
it's a big read, and it's.
You don't like cycling, we should say.
No, I'm turned off from it a bit. I think with everything that's happened in cycling over the last couple of decades, and I find it hard to believe. And you'd need a cup of coffee and an interest. And look, when you delve into it, there's loads of stuff in this. I think what's interesting is it's like he's been battling with himself in terms of what he's done in his life and how he's trying to live with himself. And he has this thing about Yale. I don't know if you got that far.
Yeah, that's a really interesting case.
He's kind of like, and it is this thing, I haven't killed anybody. And
he tried to get into Yale and they wouldn't let him in
because they said cheating in sport. Yeah. They let Tiger Woods in. So the morality of the whole thing, what's worse? And he said you can actually almost see him with the bottle of scotch going over this in his brain, going, what level of crime have I committed? And then he goes on about all these guys who are pumping money into Yale, and kids are going there, and half of them are cheating on their taxes, and is that worse than what I did? Yeah. So it's
an amazing line, Mick. He says, sport and academia, look, the highest level of professional sport is basically a war, which is a really interesting line. from an athlete to hear that line, isn't it?
He was saying you can't equate what
that
happens
with
in sport with
exactly.
cheating on a test in academia.
Yeah. I look at if you're interested in cycling, and not everybody is, you need to know the background, I think, before you read it. So that helps.
That's almost why I gave it, because Kimmage is working here with. Look, I've done 30,000 words with this guy. You all know who he is. You know the story. I'm not going to waste time giving you the story.
Yeah. So you do need to know that. But there is some really interesting stuff in it, I think, about the psychology of professional athletes, the psychology of somebody who's cheated, looks at other people who cheated. All of that is really interesting. And then Kimmage asks him, that's why I think it is well worth the read. He said, like, if I gave you a blank bit of paper and I told you, what would you change? What would you change?
Yeah.
What would you change? And because he's been helped since all of this, he's been helped by two people who've really been central to putting him back. And interesting enough, he's now running a business that makes medicinal marijuana. And I would love to actually have had a chat about it. I thought that would have been interesting to discuss as well. But in the context
how
of this...
How did you get into the medicinal marijuana?
Well, and also just the whole question of it is very interesting, but the fact that it's legal and its use, because it's not in this country. But he does come to some really interesting conclusions at the end of it. And just how he discovered his love for actually getting back on a bike and how much he hated being back on a bike. And I think the end of it is really interesting when he talks about fame and about how the one thing he didn't, if he took the bit of paper, he said, now the one thing he'd write down is, I would never want to be famous, because people think they want to be famous, and the world is full of reality TV now, and people want to be famous. And he goes, you never want to be famous for what it does to you.
Yeah,
I think that is very interesting.
It needed something to draw you into this piece, and it goes straight into a presumption that you know who this fella is and everything about him and why he's been interviewed. And it would have been a nice little couple of pairs to say, this is almost why we're doing this piece today, and you'll find it interesting because would draw you in. You have to get into it, and you have to really dedicate a bit of time to it.
To be fair, the byline is Floyd Landis won the Tour de France, then lost it for doping, and it almost cost him his life.
Yeah, but
what you want?
No, and it does cover
box.
Like it does.
Full of points.
It covers everything: revenge, morality, fame. Like it covers a lot of the
fame thing. I thought was brilliant.
Yeah. Like, that was really interesting.
He says, I watched the reality TV shows, as he said the problem with fame is you can't undo it. Yeah. Which was a really insightful line, because he talked.
But the line going back into France.
He went back into France recently. So ironically, his partner now is French, Alex. She grew up in Connecticut though from the age of 6, and they went back to Paris around the time of the tour. And he talks about even going through passport control.
Brilliant.
And Paul kind of asks, well, do you think the guy knew who you were? And he's like, who else in the world is called Floyd Landis? and he said, welcome back.
Yeah, the passport guy said, welcome back, which is really interesting.
He's aware you can't take it back. He says, it's not rewarding to be famous. It seemed appealing at the time. He says, you don't have any genuine interactions with people. They feel they know you, they're excited, but it's all fake, it's all superficial. And even that was an incredibly interesting insight into fame. You don't often get that in the sports pages.
Even the thing around the living with what you've done, so to speak, and you've got this thing around, he talks about getting back on a bike and going for a cycle and renting a bike, and how that joy of actually cycling, and then the racing is just this supercharged drug, on a better way of saying it, enhanced version of it. And again, he gets into, but I'm ashamed of what I did. But what should I have done? I guess I should have quit, but I couldn't do that. I was a kid; it would have crushed me. So
he was 26. He was 26 when he first doped.
Yeah, well, that's
and it was our friend Lance who showed him this is what you're going to do.
And there's a brilliant piece in it about him making a deposition with Lance, which amazing. I think people would be fascinated by as well. We won't ruin it, maybe giving all the details.
It's probably unfair to do all the details.
I think it's well worth it.
Yeah, the Lance thing is amazing, and even it's noteworthy that he's looking at Lance now and gets the impression Lance isn't doing so well, and feels like maybe Lance should be offered at least some kind of chance of redemption, because he says at some stage that, there's just two quick things I'll mention. Of the deposition where Lance is sitting there looking at him and he's not even meant to be there, and it's, Landis has to go, and he says Lance hasn't said anything for 12 hours, and suddenly he says to his own lawyers, he'll stay until we're done. Like, Lance is not in control of this deposition, but, and his insight into Lance, quite interesting, is it's pure Lance, we'll do whatever the F we want. And Kimmage sort of laughs and says, that's incredible. The government lawyers even looking at him. But Landis says, he's such an asshole. He can't help himself. I think that's the moral of the whole story. He can't help himself. Everyone thinks he was calculating, and he was calculating. But when it really matters, he can't effing help himself. And he says, I could tell his own lawyers were stunned. But he's looking off him now, and he's saying that There's an anxiety on his face that you see. I don't wish the guy misery for the rest of his life. Redemption should be available to people like him. Everyone likes to say that he's a complete sociopath, but, says Landis, he wouldn't look that beat up if he was a sociopath and had no feelings. I know how his face looked when he was on top of the world and he was happy. He's bitter, but then he's always been kind of bitter. That's what motivated him. But what I see now is something else. He looks beat up. At this point, I don't have any real animosity towards him. Which is pretty interesting, and definitely feels like, okay, him and Lance went down, but the system has not been fixed. No. That's a really interesting perspective as Grant Thomas saunters home this afternoon, that he still thinks the whole thing's absolute bullshit.
Well, there's a good, Eamon Sweeney has a good piece actually on the back page. There's always a few gems in Eamon's work, and he has a piece, one of his pieces today is Tour de Farce leaves us cold after string of incidents strip away final shreds of credibility. I mean, his point is, the 2018 Tour has been extraordinary. You could not get a conversion of incidents, police tear gassing people, God knows what else has happened. But he makes a really interesting point about it, and he's saying, one of the things he's saying is, why does this one seem particularly unpalatable? And he says probably because the doping, the hypocrisy skyrode into town after Lance. They were the ones who are going to be clean, and now the theory of marginal gains has kind of, we've all seen through that. But he does put, this is actually very interesting, the loss of credibility poses is evident in this year's television ratings. They're down 25% in Belgium, 18% in the UK, 13% in France, and 8% in Spain. Wow. It's a great line. In the minds of many one-time fans, the Tour has become a kind of pro wrestling without the snappy storylines and the spangly costumes.
It's 100% right, and I think it's becoming, and as again, the punter sees through stuff, and outside of France and the cycling community, I think people don't really care about the Tour de France anymore, because it's just so hard to believe what you're seeing. You also have the factor of like the World Cup this year. Like Wimbledon was on and it was great and everything, but it was so dominant from a sporting perspective that other stuff struggles to get a bit of oxygen.
Might be interesting to compare it with 4 years ago and see.
That's a good point.
Similar.
Yeah, and the point, the one little thing on the cycling that caught my eye, Joe, as well, was in the Sunday Times. David Walsh has a small little piece at the bottom of a page, but Geraint Thomas went to the same school as Gareth Bale and Sam Warburton in North Wales. And I just think, and he talks to the PE teacher and he talks about how multi-talented he was, and he remembers him winning 1500 metre finals and whatever. So, these were all, it's incredible, three athletes who were superstars in their sports, all came from the same school, were all multi-talented and sported, and yet put them into cycling and we're all wondering. That's all.
Are they testing those children?
I was going to say. Well, that's what I love about school sport.
State-sponsored madness is going on there.
We're presuming in the playground there they're naturally talented always. Exactly. Yeah. It's interesting. Very interesting.
Wouldn't be third in the school sports that year.
Is there a more talented school than twice Lions captain, Gareth Bale, most expensive footballer in the world, and Tour de France winner? There can't be a better school in the world.
Pretty amazing. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Wow. Is that PE teacher's done a few interviews down the years? I've seen him.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. The hockey's on this evening.
Yep.
Yeah, Ireland play England tonight at 7 p.m. Yeah, in a practice match basically for the Irish women.
Is this one of those things where they're deciding, do they want to go on the easy side of the draw again, or is it that scenario?
No, I don't think. It seems to me that they'll probably just go out and play how they would normally have played England, because it's probably not going to be England. If they beat them, I still don't think they'd meet England in their quarter-final.
Right.
So I think they'll just take it as a great... And the interesting thing about hockey as well is it's not like you're going to play your B team, because they rotate all the time. So players are constantly rotating.
Okay.
So Graham Shaw actually is really, really big on giving them all equal amount of time, so they're in and out, and it's a 4-quarter game. So it means you push to 15, you push to 15. So it isn't like you can go out and play a B team. The way they play is they push them hard for everything.
And this is I think this is great. I love when a so-called minority sport gets a little bit of oxygen, because hockey is an amazing tradition in this country, as do things like cricket and other sports as well, that come in cycles, so to speak. And this is a phenomenal achievement. If Ireland win tonight, my understanding is they may avoid, and you correct me if I'm wrong now, the big three, which is kind of Holland,
Argentina and England. England are ranked second in it.
So there is a chance that we could have an Irish team that's going to make it to a semi-final of a World Cup, which would be absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah.
In a global sport, played in high populated countries and so forth as well, and some of them where it's professional. So I think it's brilliant. I think, and it's great to see. And look, if they get a run at it tonight and they draw, they're through to the so-called easier side of the draw.
Yeah, Cliona, you're writing about it here. Hard work bears fruit for brilliant girls in green. This is the Sunday Independent. What is this being put down to? Because this is a team who hadn't qualified for World Cup for 16 years and were very unfortunate in terms of qualifying for the Olympics, and now suddenly they're doing it at a World Cup.
Yeah, hard work and a really good coach, and retaining the really experienced players, and also bringing in some new talent as well. Yeah, I just interviewed Katie Mullen, the captain, and what I've interviewed a few of them. What struck me about them also was they're all multi-talented. We had them in and off the bench, 3 of them. They all had other sports. She has an All-Ireland club intermediate camogie title with her club in Derry, and she played underage camogie for Derry. But they all eventually then specialised, but they're all multi-talented. So, she talked to me about they had this famous session in the Curragh last January where they were on the assault course and they had an absolute horrendous morning, and then they were in the pool and she said half of them don't swim and it was a killer, and then they got back to the hotel and they thought we'll have a nice easy day, and then their S&C guy took them off to the rugby club in Portlaoise and ran the absolute legs off them. They couldn't believe it. But getting through those kind of sessions, and this is their point, is that first of all they really trust in the work they've done, and then they really trust in Graham Shaw. He's a very innovative coach. You were talking about him earlier in the week here, and she said we absolutely trust everything he tells us. You know, we believe in his game plans, so when we go out we just stick to them. And she said the difference now for them is that they stick to them for the full 60 minutes. They don't let it drop.
I watched a bit of hockey during the last Olympics, and it's a really tough sport.
Yeah.
It's mental. Why are they not wearing helmets for a start? And just physically, I hadn't fully appreciated how mad a sport is.
And as I said, the 4 15-minute quarters means that every single quarter is full on. There's no let up at all. So all of that has contributed to them being. There were a couple of other articles in a couple of other papers as well. Rod Gilmore does a piece in the Mail, and he points out that he's talking about Ireland and hockey, and he's saying there are no hockey pitches whatsoever in 7 counties in Ireland, and just trying to put that into context, which is a good line.
Because you kind of half assume, wrongly obviously, that maybe most schools or a lot of schools
it's not played in all schools, and I was teasing them when we had.
Is it still a posh sport?
Well, I threw that line at them when they were in here. But what I've kind of realised is that it isn't, you know. And even if you look on the Irish men's team, because I threw that posh hurling line at the Irish men's goalie as well, and then discovered, you know, that himself and his brother, you know, grew up playing GA.
And this girl, they come from all walks of life, and it would have been seen as a little bit like rugby, as a kind of elite and private school in Northern Ireland and whatever. But
I'm just thinking
that's quite unfair, actually.
Loretto getting their hockey pitch in the sports grants controversy in Rathfarnham.
Wesley.
Well, Wesley did as well. I think Loretto did in Rathfarnham as well. So it kind of has that vibe.
But what other sport, irrespective of all of that, what other sport do we qualify for World Cups in, and what other sport now have we qualified for a quarter final in with a game to spare, and the game to spare is against the Olympic champions, England?
Rugby. We're good at posh sports. Is that the contention?
This is a truly global sport as well, played professionally in other countries, and there's real depth in this competition, and I think it's a phenomenal achievement what they've done. And I'd like to learn more about these girls, because I think there's some great stories in there. That girl who played camogie that you were talking about earlier on, and there's a whole heap of other girls in there that are fascinating.
I was just saying to Mick outside, virtually all of them has a fascinating story.
Well,
and Stephen Findlater, who has been writing about them for years for the Irish Times and Examiner, has written some amazing ones, including Grace O'Flanagan, one of the goalkeepers, had cancer 2 years ago. I mean, they're just an extraordinary group of women.
Rebecca Myers wrote about it in the Sunday Times as well, and so it's worth saying this is obviously an amateur team. I'm sure people would have presumed that. Part-time, full-time jobs. Their captain, Katie Mullen, she's just completed a master's degree in biomedical engineering.
In UCD, she's been in UCD.
Where can people get that podcast?
One other thing is that they had no sponsor up until 2 months ago.
Yeah.
You know.
Right.
Nobody would sponsor them.
Going to a World Cup.
Yeah, and I was saying, Softco, the crowd who sponsored them, did anybody ever get such a quick return?
Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
In fairness to them, they went in and they did it when there was a gap, and that was a a patronage job rather than a demand for return on
because
investment, and they've actually got a great return on investment.
They've got an amazing
fair play to them.
Softco.
Yeah, and they've gone in.
What does Softco do?
They've done other things as well. They've got involved in their technology, software technology, and there's a couple involved in the company, and they've sponsored a couple of other things. They sponsor a bit of golf, they sponsor a bit of rugby as well. But there was a gap. Somebody knew somebody. The team needed help. It wasn't a cynical. And you know what? They've got a huge spin out of it. And what I didn't realise until is that thankfully the team logo the sponsored logo stay on the kit for the World Cup, whereas in a lot of sports they come off for the like rugby and that,
Rugby World Cup,
you have to take the logo off. So if they're getting all this coverage and they stepped in when no one else would step in, well then great.
I just think it shows sometimes that companies need to look outside the big 3 or 4 sometimes, and just to open their minds. A little bit of sports coverage has to be as well. Open your minds to see what the possibilities are.
Leadland ladies football was one. I look at sports like basketball and others there, and I'm going, God, if you spent €100,000 on that, the return you
what
get.
What could it do for them? Yeah.
Softco.com. Give them a little plug so you can go and check out all their business. So that's on at 7 this evening. It's on BT Sport 1.
Yeah, it's on BT Sports, yeah.
You quite liked, actually, I forgot John Green's piece as well on the sports policy doc. I guess it ties in with the hockey thing. John Green's looking at this 10-year plan now. We didn't have one for nearly 10 years, and now we suddenly do. And like John's overarching point, he does really good analysis on it, and he was in here during the week actually and teased out a lot of the same points.
He is the best, I think, the best Irish sports journalist on this area of policy and investment in government and NGBs and all that sort of thing. He's very good on it.
When the news broke about it last Tuesday or Wednesday, the first person I texted was,
he's really good.
Can you come in? So like he makes the point that the policy set out of Ireland's going to get more people physically active. So the big headline stuff is they're going to go from 110 million to 220 million a year spent on sport, which is good. The big plan, he says, is 250,000 more people to become active. We're going to become Europe's most obese nation by 2030. He says we've got 43% of people active now. They want to get to 50. He points out that we've a greying population, that we've 13% over 65 now. By 2026 it's going to be 17%. So actually even the gains you've made, we're going to have to make more gains just to stand still. And he's making the point, as he did on Off the Ball during the week, they're going to need Department of Finance, Department of Health, Department of Education is crucial, social welfare, local government, housing, children. That actually, this is a very tough thing to do. The big worry with this stuff always is that if you're a politician in the Department of Health or a civil servant, or if you're Shane Ross or any of these people, like if you're voted out of office at the next round of elections and you've done great work on this, no one's going to turn around in 2030 and say, do you know what, thanks, you did a great job, you got participation up, and maybe we shouldn't have not elected you. They are all about the short term with stuff like this. That is an issue.
Well, thanks. There's been a few things. There's a 2040 infrastructural report out as well. But this one, I think when you look at sport and sports funding, it breaks into 3 areas, and John has them covered off well. Participation is the first one, and obviously they'll draw the line between the economic analysis between a healthier nation, less health care, there's an easy one there. We need to be a healthy nation. There's the there's the elite piece, which is sometimes hard to argue when, people evaluate success in different ways, and there's a traditional way around medals and all that, but our elite athletes deserve the best that they can get, and that's what's there. And then facilities is a third one in terms of infrastructure. And I think this is a really good piece by John. He is on top of the issue, as you say. We have a massive issue in this country, and we track this ourselves, in that the more middle class you are, I hate that term, but it's the truth, the healthier you are in this country. And we have 2 big things. One is the lack of female participation, which is now right smack bang in the spotlight, and girls who give up competitive sport. At 13 is a huge cliff.
Half of them. 18,
forget about it after that. And it's trying to create and change the culture and create different sports and that keep females active and participating in sport is crucial. And then the second one is people from disadvantaged areas, when a better way of saying it, are almost twice as likely to be unfit as people who are from middle class parts of Ireland, and that's wrong. And I think the one thing, and John only touches on it, and I wish he went into a bit more detail, is the PE system in this country is where you can level the playing field, because going to schools and going to play club rugby or GAA or soccer or athletics or whatever, you got your mum and dad need to drive you. The more active your parents are, the more likely you are to get involved and all that kind of stuff. But I think school is where you can get kids from 5 years of age, where you can make sure that they eat properly and they exercise properly. And unfortunately, because of funding issues, PE is very much kind of it's completely different in one school than it is in another school. And there should be, I think, in my view, compulsory physical education in schools, and with an overemphasis on what you would call traditionally disadvantaged areas where the facilities, we should over-egg the facilities and over-egg the infrastructure and the funding for those parts of Ireland. And you can see it all the time.
He does make that point here, Mick. He touches on it. He was in during the week and he spoke very well. He said it's about two things, parents and education. That's what it's all about. But he does make the very good point here, because it's one that I'm an ex-PE teacher, and this is the one that always cracks me up, is we don't have specialist PE teachers in primary schools. So it's a lottery. It depends on how well your teacher is with PE and sport. But he makes the point here, which is the one that I really hone in on always, is coaches and staff from NGBs, national governing bodies, are already working with children in primary schools. But concerns exist that the focus here is sport specific. So in other words, if the PE in your school is dependent on, or is largely involved with people coming in from different sporting associations to coach your children, that's not physical education. That's not physical literacy. That is coaching them in a sport. But what we know is that, particularly with girls and boys now increasingly, but more with girls too, is that if they don't feel they have the skills and don't have the confidence to do something, they won't try it or they won't stay in it. So PE is physical education. It's not sports coaching, and that is a big problem we have. And I think it
100%.
comes back to this primary school thing of, and you talk to primary school teachers, they only get a section of their training over 4 years that deals with physical education, and a lot of them come out not feeling confident to teach it and would love to have had more. And as I said, your child then in primary school, they can have a brilliant teacher who's brilliant at physical education with them, or they just might not. And unfortunately, that's the system, because they won't let specialist PE teachers into primary schools.
Why not? That seems like a no-brainer, because
it's a philosophy thing. No, it's also a philosophy. Some private schools will pay and bring in a specialist PE teacher, but in primary schools, but most of them don't. And it goes back to a philosophy of that your teacher in primary school should be all encompassing, and that you could create with the children in your class, you create a whole general thing. But I think it's a weakness in our system. I'm very biased on this. As an ex-PE teacher, I'm very biased.
But it's also hassle cleaner for teachers. The kids have to get changed. They've got to go to facilities.
Of course, it's not
raining,
easy
it's easy to read a book and all that kind of stuff. And I think you're making a really good point. The GA have been masters of this, where they've sent games promotion officers into primary schools. And you're right, they are keeping, to most part, it's fun and it's whatever. But if a child's not into hurling or no good, or as they say, is not particularly natural at the sport, there should be an opportunity for that kid to be able to walk for an hour, or run or swim or do something that's going to keep them physically fit. And the more unfit the kids are, the more excuse are, and they don't do it. And it's just easier for the teacher to go, grand, you don't have to do it today.
You want to teach them to skills, to jump, to throw, to hit, to do all of those things. That's what they need in their primary schools.
Learn how to run and
walk.
They
need more of that. Exactly, So,
because there'd be more than enough hours in the day if every class in a primary school was doing PE at least every second day. There's more than enough hours to justify a full-time PE teacher.
Yeah, well, in my belief there is, and I think if we were really serious about it, there would be a whole rethink about this. I would, they're talking about making PE a Leaving Cert subject now. For me, I think it would be more useful to allow specialist PE teachers to go into primary schools. And maybe, it's a long time since I was teaching, so maybe that has improved and changed. But I still think it probably, if you look closely at it, it could be an issue. And particularly, as you say, in areas of deprivation, where you even need it even more, because families don't have the resources to bring their children to sport.
That's where you would start. That's where you start, and you can look. It's stereotyping, but look in wealthy South Dublin suburbs, you can rely. It seems, looking at the data, on parents to have enough to be able to bring them to the local clubs. But let's start in the areas where nobody's participating in sport.
And give them skills.
And I think over the last 50 years, the government has let the GA, RFU, and FAI in particular train and get the kids of the nation fit, and that's the truth. And they haven't invested in physical education in a formal way in this country, which is wrong. And those three big sports and other sports but they're the biggest numbers in terms of they put kids through their hands. It's £100 a year or whatever for your kid to go 3 times a week to the local soccer club.
I also remember Fiona Coughlin telling me that, and she teaches in a school. I think she's out in maybe out in Coolock or somewhere. But I remember her telling me that she had loads of children in her classes who had never been in a swimming pool ever in their lives. She also, in recent years, has found a young girl in her class. Rowing Ireland have a really good girls program in schools that they let them try it out, and she's found a girl who's brilliant at rowing. This kid would never ever had the chance to do rowing. You know what I mean? So it's just a question of teaching them proper skills and then giving them opportunities. So it's a lot more than just sending sports coaches into schools, and so that is addressed in this. They do point that out in this.
You just hope they make a success of this. From memory, on Tuesday's conversation with John, I think there's going to be a leadership panel established in the next few months, and then there'll be 15 people on that group. They'll have 9 months to think up of good plans to hit each objective, and that's where this thing's going to float or just kind of ebb away very, very quickly.
And
you just hope
as
they
Mick says,
do a good
it
job.
has to be it should be a multi-departmental approach, because everything that impinges on health, impinges on sport. They're so co-joined. That's very important.
And every kid should have the same opportunity.
Yeah, no, it's true. We're not going to have time to get all the Liam Miller pieces. There's just a general sense of, about that. Dave Alred with David Walsh is kind of interesting, just because what he did for Jessica Molinari, what he's doing with various people. Works with Johnny Sexton as well. He's like a guru, which is always a phrase that would spark a degree of scepticism and alarm in a lot of people. But he's doing very well with a lot of people already. The most interesting stuff for me in it was just he gave some details on what he did with Molinari when he first started working with him.
Yeah, and I don't know whether you noticed that as well. There's a piece towards the end where he talks about this often interests me with skills coaches, which is that he makes him practice something, and like for example putting, and then go and hit a drive. Right? And because I think a lot of the time people practice, but not under any kind of pressure, or not in the order that they would do it in the actual match or the game or the competition. I thought that was fascinating, Joe, wasn't it?
Well, it's brilliant. I mean, the reason so he's done remarkably well. He got Luke Donald to world number 1. He said, I feel Luke would have won a major if he just bitten the bullet. Luke got rid of him because he felt it was overdoing the analysis. And he talks about meeting Molinari 2 years ago. Molinari was like 89th in the world. So what he did with him, first off, was he said, gave him a really tough flop shot, kind of a bad lie in the rough, had to hit a pin. He said, I asked him to get it within 3 feet of the cup. And he says it was on his 48th chip, he says, David Walsh, that he got it to within 3 feet. He said he was embarrassed it had taken that number. That's so often he says he tries to make things tough in practice. But he says he'll get them to hit the driver and then have to walk over to the putting green and then hit some 8-foot putts and then have to walk back to the driver. No player wants to do that. That is miserable.
Yeah, he talks about
it mimics the pattern of golf.
Totally.
That's because it's no good, because even chumps like us can go to the driving range, and if we hit 30 shots in a row, you start to get a bit of a rhythm and compensate for the mistakes, and you come away from the driving range going, God, I hit it really well there. But then go out and have to hit your first one on the 4th hole, and you only get one shot and you're back to square zero, whereas Alred's quite clever and all this. And he says that Molinari emails him after every round assessing each shot out of 10.
Well, I actually enjoy. I flicked through it and I enjoyed it. I think what jumps out at me for this is the style that Alred uses. And look, you don't read all the people that he's worked with who haven't won things, right? But the Johnny Wilkinson one is a really famous one, obviously, and he talks about people out of their comfort zone and making people go out of their comfort zone and go to what I think he calls an ugly place. I think he says somewhere in the piece as well.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting to see his style. And what I found quite interesting was, and it's a very opening line, is, okay, he's done a big piece on it the week after, but he was getting on the plane when Molinari was on the 18th. And he wasn't there, looking for limelight on the day. And this is one of the most amazing kind of achievements as well, like the chasing pack that day. Tiger Woods, Rory McIlroy and Jordan Spieth, like to hold your nerve and to do what he did. And I think he birdied the 18th if I remember correctly.
Played it beautifully,
It's unbelievable. Like those last 3-4 holes in Carnoustie are vicious. And it was a brilliant achievement, the first Italian in 21 years or whatever it was as well. So
his wedge on the 18th was incredible.
And I didn't know
he gave that a 10 out of 10, by the way.
Molinari himself, didn't he?
He gave the drive 9 out of 10 and the wedge 10 out of 10.
I didn't know he was getting work with Alred, but it's obviously had an impact because he showed some steel anyway in the last.
No, for sure. I take your point about not seeking the limelight on the day. But then look, will I do a standout piece in the Sunday Times with David Walsh. I mean, okay, I'll do that. Will I have my sponsor's T-shirt there in the picture? Okay, I'll do that as well.
Fair enough.
There's always a little bit of
there he is
going
there,
on.
yeah.
It is, but it's a great read. I mean,
it's
I
good.
think it's a great read. And I think golfers, and not even I think all sports people would be interested in it, and particularly golfers, because I really think that thing about not practicing in this vacuum, which I think a lot of people do.
And not paying
in a
attention
game
to each
competition.
shot. Yeah, totally. Yeah, practice ugly is one of his big phrases. So we didn't get to everything. We got to most things. It was actually a pretty good Sunday for...
it was very good. Really good.
Yeah.
Daily Mail is very good today.
I thought, actually, on the last one, on the Liam Miller...
through a lot of the Daily Mail stuff. There's loads of good stuff there.
There's a good one, I think, on the political opportunism on the Liam Miller one that Shane McGrath has, actually, which is worth a read.
David Snade republishes an interview he did with Liam Miller back in 2015, which is
very poignant.
Daily
Mail did you said 9 pages?
9 pages on the Liam Miller, which I thought was over-egging it a little bit. But I thought Mick Clifford is a really good column on it, and Shane McGrath is very good on it as well. And Philip Lanigan has a good piece talking about the traditional conservatism of the Cork County Board in relation to this anyway, and points out that the Bishop blessed the reopening of Páirc Uí Chaoimh. Church and state and GA, they were the 3 pillars always. Are they still there?
They still have the Bishop thrown in balls for the start of games in Cork club hurling football, do they?
No.
They would if they could.
I don't think so.
I think, no, but his point is there are some people, and even at Congress last year when 90-something% of GA voted that internationally other sports could use their grounds,
Cork
opposed it.
Cork
said no.
That's true. Cliona Foley, host of Off the Bench, journalist, and Mick O'Keefe, CEO of Teneo PSG Communications. Thanks so much for coming in. Take a short break. We're back at Crow Park. You'll hear from Dan Shanahan and Paddy Maher and Tommy Welch with Shane Stapleton. That's all on the way.
The Sunday Papers on Off the